Welcome to Explain America. I'm your host, Kyle Becker. Well, you might have heard about this Subway sandwich attacker. He threw a sub-foot-long sandwich at a CBP officer, and the grand jury in D.C., they let him off the hook on felony charges. I guess that was their way of thumbing their nose at Donald Trump and his initiative to lower crime and to deport criminal aliens in Washington, D.C. But there's a new development here that shows that, well, this Subway sandwich attacker, he might be joining Jared in prison sometime soon. But before we get to this story, please like, share, and comment Explain America. We appreciate your support for common sense journalism. Now, Sean Dunn, he on August 10th threw a Subway sandwich at a Customs and Border Protection agent in Washington, D.C. He was arrested on the scene and fired from his job. But a grand jury rejected felony charges. However, Pam Bondi, in a new announcement, well, she has bad news for this guy. He is not done yet. He is getting hit with misdemeanor charges. So guess what? The Department of Justice, they're not going to let you escape justice that easily. But this brings up a bigger problem, and not just attacks on our Border Patrol, which are reprehensible, obviously. It is a problem where D.C. has failed to uphold justice in our country. It is the nation's capital. It should be the font of justice for the country. It should be the heartbeat of it. It's where the nation's laws are drafted and passed through the Congress. It's where the Supreme Court resides, where they enforce the laws of the land, including the U.S. Constitution. And it's also where the executive branch is, with the Department of Justice and the FBI, which are supposed to work together to bring criminals to justice. But there is a problem with all of this in that the nation's core is clearly corrupt. And there is way too much toleration for criminals in the Republic's heartbeat. So we need to really do something about these criminals because it's turning into Gotham City, basically. And there are just rampant gangs that have been on the loose for too long. But thankfully, Donald Trump invoked the Home Rule Act. So for 30 days at least, him and Pam Bondi can try to bring some law and order to the country's capital. It really is reflective of the way the entire country goes. So one of the things that's interesting about this is the D.C. Circuit Court is clearly corrupt. And when that is corrupt, it rubs off on the rest of the nation. One of the things that we need to see in Washington, D.C. really is a breakup of all of the power that is concentrated there. Because really, if you look at the wealth that has grown up in the heart of our country in terms of the politics, where all of the power runs through it. K Street lobbyists, you name it. They have just flocked to the Capitol and made a killing at taxpayer expense. They have been draining the resources from the rest of the country for too long without giving us anything in return. So something that really needs to happen is to break this cartel up. We need to separate these agencies. We have the internet now. You can do a lot of things remote. Congressmen need to return to their districts. We need to stop concentrating so much power in the Capitol and stop giving them so much of our wealth and so much of our power because, honestly, they cannot be trusted. And if you just look at the crime in D.C. in their own backyard, they don't care about it. They haven't until President Donald Trump came along and Pam Bondi and Jeanine Pirro, who's a U.S. attorney in D.C., they're finally doing something about it, but it's really a systemic problem, and we're going to need much more extensive reforms, not just a temporary Home Rule Act, enforcement for 30 days, just some National Guard troops on the streets. It's going to take much more than that. So we need systemic reform in this country. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of political will for that in the country right now. It seems like people don't really talk about this. And I think that's because in the mainstream media, it is thoroughly corrupt and they enjoy having the power centralized. And they are essentially reflective of the power brokers in our nation. So whether it's the NGOs that make billions of dollars from taxpayers, just all the way down the line to our universities, which get grants, Pell Grants, for example, and federal funding of student loans. The system is set up to be corrupted. And we need to return some local control. And then people will really care about what's happening in their backyard. Because in D.C., they really don't seem to care. And it's nice to see Pam Bondi stepping up and, slapping around this subway attacker, because that guy needs to be held accountable. You cannot have people walking around insulting law enforcement. There's far too much of that. But on the other hand, it's a great symbolic act that he did, because in some ways it reflects the way that our law enforcement has been disrespected wrongfully for too long. And Pam Bondi is stepping up to do the right thing here and send a message. No, you need to respect our law enforcement, and our law enforcement need to be worthy of being respected. And I think that Trump is on his way to doing that, and that is the kind of leadership that this nation desperately needs. So please like, share, and comment with this story. Share your feedback. We appreciate hearing from you.